The cold metal floor pressed against Jiho's cheek as he lay in the darkness. His body ached from the crash 3 days ago. Or was it 4? Time had no meaning in this place. The cell walls were made of some dark stone that seemed to swallow light. He could hear other prisoners in nearby cells, breathing, whimpering, waiting. Jiho was a medic. He had spent 5 years learning how to save lives, not take them. His hands were meant for healing, for stitching wounds and setting broken bones. But the war had come anyway, and he had been pulled into it like everyone else. His colony, New Haven, had been peaceful. Farmers and doctors and teachers living quietly on the edge of explored space. Then, the Vrexian ships had appeared in the sky. He closed his eyes and saw the battle again, the explosions, the screaming. His squad had fought hard, but they were no match for the Vrexian warriors. Those massive creatures with their 4 arms and crystal-like skin had torn through the human defenses like they were made of paper. Jiho had tried to save his friends, dragging wounded soldiers to cover, but it hadn't mattered. In the end, only he survived. Only he was taken prisoner. The Vrexians hadn't bothered to explain why they kept him alive. They had simply thrown him in a transport ship with other captives from other worlds. Small creatures with fur. Tall beings with too many eyes. All of them were weak in Vrexian eyes. All of them were prey. Now he was here, in the bowels of their war moon called Krathvar. The other prisoners had told him what this place was: an arena, a place where the Vrexians watched weak species fight and die for their entertainment. Jiho would be forced into that arena soon. He would die there, and no one would remember his name. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. Every prisoner went silent. Jiho pushed himself up to sit against the wall. His ribs hurt, probably cracked from when the Vrexian soldier had kicked him during capture. He took slow breaths and waited. The footsteps grew louder. Then they stopped outside his cell. Light flooded in as the door slid open. Jiho squinted against the brightness. A massive shadow filled the doorway, then stepped inside. She was taller than any Vrexian he had seen before. Nearly 8 feet of pure muscle and crystalline armor that seemed to grow from her skin. Her 4 arms hung at her sides, each one tipped with claws that could tear through metal. Her face was angular and sharp, with eyes that glowed a pale blue. She wore the marks of a champion, scars and symbols etched into her armor. 2 smaller Vrexian guards stood behind her in the corridor. They looked nervous, even though they were warriors themselves. That told Jiho something important. This female was dangerous, even to her own kind. She looked down at Jiho with cold interest. Her eyes scanned his small human body, his soft skin, his 2 weak arms. Then she laughed. It was a harsh sound, like rocks grinding together. "This is the human?" she said in her language. Jiho had learned enough Vrexian during his imprisonment to understand basic words. This soft thing survived a battle? One of the guards stepped forward. Yes, Champion Tael. He was the only one. The others died with honor in combat. This one hid like a coward. It wasn't true. Jiho hadn't hidden. He had fought to save his squad until the very end. But he didn't bother to correct them. What would be the point? Tael stepped closer. She crouched down, bringing her face level with his. Up close, Jiho could see that her crystalline skin had tiny fractures in it, old wounds that had healed over time. She had been fighting for a long time, probably her whole life. "You will die in my arena, human," Tael said slowly, making sure he understood. "You will die badly. The crowd will laugh at how weak you are. Your species will be remembered as nothing." Jiho looked at her. Really looked at her. He saw the scars. Yes, he saw the power in her body. But he also saw something else. He saw someone who had never known anything, except fighting. Someone who had been turned into a weapon and had forgotten how to be anything else. And for just a moment, Jiho felt sad. Not for himself, but for her. His eyes must have shown that sadness, that pity. Because Tael's expression changed. The cruel smile faded. Her glowing eyes widened slightly. She stared at Jiho like he had just done something impossible. "What was that?" she demanded. "What did you just do?" Jiho didn't understand the question. He hadn't done anything. He had just looked at her. "Why do you look at me like that?" Tyel's voice rose. "You should be afraid. You should be begging for mercy. You should be crying, like all the other prey species." But Jiho was too tired to be afraid. He had already lost everything. His home, his friends, his sister Hana, who had smiled so bright when she told him she wanted to be a doctor too. All of it was gone. What was there left to fear? "I'm sorry," Jiho said quietly in broken Vrexian. Tyel stood up fast, all forearms tensing. "Sorry? For what?" Jiho couldn't find the words to explain. He was sorry that she had never known kindness. Sorry that she thought strength meant cruelty. Sorry that this was all she had ever been allowed to be. But he couldn't say all that in her language, so he just lowered his eyes and said nothing. Tyel made a disgusted sound. She turned and walked out of the cell. The door slammed shut behind her, leaving Jiho in darkness again. He heard her footsteps moving away down the corridor, faster than before, angry. In the cell next to his, another prisoner whispered through the wall. It was an old Celtic male who had been here for months. "That was Tyel," the voice said. "The undefeated champion. She has killed hundreds in the arena. She especially hates species that show defiance." "I didn't defy her," Jiho said. "Then what did you do?" I heard her voice change. "You made her angry." Jiho leaned his head back against the cold wall. "I don't know. I just looked at her." The old prisoner was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Well, whatever you did, you'll pay for it in the arena. She'll make your death slow now. Get some sleep while you can, human. It might be your last night." But Jiho couldn't sleep. He kept seeing Tyel's face. That moment when her expression changed. She had looked almost confused, almost vulnerable, like no one had ever looked at her that way before. Maybe no one had. Outside the cell, somewhere in the massive war moon, Tyel was trying to forget the human's eyes, but she couldn't. That look haunted her through the night, and she hated him for it. The guards came for Jiho at dawn. They dragged him from his cell along with 3 other prisoners. One was the old Celtic male who had warned him about Tyel. Another was a young Celtic female, barely more than a child, with wide, terrified eyes. The third was a creature Jiho didn't recognize, something with scales and too many limbs. They were pushed down a long tunnel. Jiho could hear the crowd above them, thousands of voices chanting and screaming for blood. The sound grew louder with each step. His heart pounded in his chest, but he kept his breathing steady. Panic wouldn't help him now. The young Celtic female stumbled. Jiho caught her arm and helped her stay on her feet. She looked up at him with those huge eyes, shaking. Jiho gave her what he hoped was a reassuring nod. It was a lie, of course. There was nothing reassuring about where they were going. But maybe a small kindness mattered, even at the end. The tunnel opened into blinding sunlight. The arena was massive. A circular pit, surrounded by thousands of Vrexian spectators in rising seats. The sand beneath Jiho's feet was stained dark in places. Old blood, never fully washed away. The crowd roared when they saw the prisoners emerge. A voice boomed across the arena, speaking in Vrexian. Jiho caught some of the words. Prey species. Entertainment. Death. Entertainment. Then the gates on the far side of the arena opened, and the Vorthax were released. They were like nothing Jiho had ever seen. 6-legged predators, each one the size of a ground car, with mouths full of razor teeth. Their skin was dark and armored. Their eyes glowed red with hunger. There were 6 of them, and they spread out quickly, surrounding the prisoners. The old Celtic male screamed and ran. The scaled creature froze in terror. The young female, whose name Jiho learned later was Rena, grabbed onto Jiho's shirt and wouldn't let go. Jiho's mind went into the calm space it always found during emergencies. He had learned this in medical school. When everything was chaos, when people were dying, you had to find the quiet center inside yourself. You had to think clearly. He looked at the arena, calculating distances and angles. He looked at the other prisoners, assessing their capabilities. He looked at the Vorthax, studying their movement patterns. Then he started giving orders. He used hand signals mostly, since the others didn't speak his language. He pointed to positions, mimed defensive stances. The old Celtic male didn't listen, still running in panic, but the scaled creature understood, taking a position on Jiho's left. Rena stayed close behind him, and Jiho grabbed a broken piece of metal from the arena floor to use as a weapon. The first Vorthax charged. Jiho waited until the last second, then dove to the side. The creature's momentum carried it past him, and the scaled prisoner lashed out with its limbs, striking the Vorthax in its eyes. The beast shrieked and pulled back. "Stay together," Jiho shouted, not caring if they understood the words. They would understand the tone. "Don't scatter." The Vorthax circled them, looking for weak points. One of them caught the old Celtic male, dragging him down. His screams cut off quickly. Jiho felt sick, but he couldn't help him. He had to focus on keeping the others alive. High above in the champion's box, Tyel watched the human with growing interest. This wasn't how prey species were supposed to behave. They were supposed to panic, to run uselessly, to die quickly. But the human was thinking, coordinating, treating the arena like some kind of tactical problem to solve. "Impossible," said Kael, her second in command, standing beside her. "Humans don't have the mental capacity for strategy under stress." "Watch him," Tyel said quietly. Down in the arena, Jiho had positioned his small group against one of the arena walls. It meant the Vorthax could only attack from one direction. When one lunged, all three prisoners moved together, striking at its exposed belly. When another tried to flank them, Jiho threw sand in its eyes and drove his makeshift weapon into its throat. They killed one Vorthax, then another. The crowd's cheers turned to confused muttering. This wasn't supposed to happen. Then Rena cried out. A Vorthax had gotten past their defense and slashed her leg. She fell, bleeding heavily. The scaled creature moved to protect her but took a bite to its shoulder and went down too. Jiho dropped his weapon and grabbed Rena, dragging her behind him as he backed toward the wall. He tore strips from his prison shirt and wrapped her leg tight, stopping the worst of the bleeding. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, even as two Vorthax advanced on him. The crowd was completely silent now. They had never seen anything like this. A prey species, about to die, wasting precious seconds to help another prey species. The scaled creature died next, overwhelmed by three Vorthax at once. Now it was just Jiho and Rena. 4 Vorthax left, all of them angry and hurt. Jiho positioned himself in front of the girl, both arms spread wide like he could somehow shield her with his small human body. The Vorthax charged together. Jiho had one last plan. He had noticed that the arena walls had metal brackets spaced along them, probably for hanging banners or equipment. He jumped up, grabbed one bracket, and swung his body weight hard. The bracket broke free from the old stone, and Jiho landed on top of the nearest Vorthax, driving the sharp metal down through its skull. The creature thrashed and died. Jiho rolled clear, grabbed Rena, and ran. The remaining 3 Vorthax pursued, but Jiho led them into a pattern. He made them circle, made them crash into each other. Then he used the dead Vorthax bodies as barriers, creating a maze that forced the predators to come at him one at a time. It took forever. It took seconds. Time had no meaning. But when the last Vorthax fell, Jiho collapsed to his knees in the blood-soaked sand. Rena was still alive behind him, conscious but weak. The arena was absolutely silent. Then Tyel stood up in the champion's box. The movement drew every eye. She descended the steps to the arena floor, her 4 arms carrying weapons. Protocol demanded that she execute survivors personally. It was her right as champion, her duty. She walked across the sand toward the exhausted human. He was covered in blood, most of it not his own. His breathing was ragged. But when he saw her coming, he didn't run. He pulled Rena closer behind him and met Tyel's eyes. "Make it quick," Jiho said in his broken Vrexian. His voice was steady despite everything. "She's just a kid." Tyel stopped. She had killed thousands of beings in this arena. She had never hesitated before. But now, she couldn't move. This human should be begging for his life. Instead, he was asking for mercy for someone else, someone weaker, someone he had just met. In Vrexian culture, the weak were abandoned. Only the strong deserved to survive. That was the foundation of everything. But this human was deliberately choosing to die for someone weak. It made no sense. "You could run," Tyel said. "You have earned the right to try. The crowd would enjoy the chase." "No," Jiho said simply. "Why?" Jiho looked down at Rena, who was gripping his arm with trembling hands. Then he looked back at Tyel. "Because she's terrified. Because she's someone's daughter. Because I promised myself I would save lives, not abandon them." Tyel felt something strange in her chest. An uncomfortable feeling she had no name for. She looked at the crowd. They were waiting for blood. They always got blood. But Tyel was the champion. She made the rules in this arena. "I claim them," she announced loudly, her voice carrying across the arena. "As training thralls, they will live as my property, to practice my skills upon." The crowd murmured uncertainly. It was an old tradition, rarely used, but it was allowed. The arena master nodded from his box. Guards came forward with chains. Jiho didn't resist, as they bound his wrists. Neither did Rena. As they were led away, Tyel walked beside them. "You should have run, human," she said quietly, so only he could hear. "Now you belong to me. I will find out why you are the way you are." Jiho looked at her with those same sad eyes from before. "Maybe you will," he said, and Tyel felt that uncomfortable feeling grow stronger. Tyel's training compound was built into the side of a cliff overlooking the War Moon's industrial sector. It was a place of hard stone and harder rules. Everything here existed for one purpose: to create better warriors. Jiho and Rena were given a small room with thin sleeping mats and a bucket of water. Compared to the prison cells, it was luxury. Compared to freedom, it was still a cage. The testing began the next morning. Tyel wanted to understand what she had seen in the arena. She needed to find the weakness, the breaking point. Every species had one. Prey species especially. Their compassion, their emotional bonds. These were flaws that could be exploited. Tyel was certain that if she pushed hard enough, Jiho would reveal his true cowardly nature. She started with combat training. She paired Jiho against training drones programmed to his skill level, then gradually increased the difficulty. He wasn't a fighter. That much was obvious. His movements were defensive, cautious, but he learned quickly. He watched the drones' patterns and adapted. When he couldn't overpower them, he outmaneuvered them. "You fight like prey," Tyel observed, her forearms crossed. "Always running. Always dodging." "I fight to survive," Jiho replied, breathing hard. "Not to dominate." 2020-2012. There is no difference. Yes, there is. Tyel increased the difficulty. The drones became faster, more aggressive. Jiho took hits now, hard ones that left bruises on his soft human skin. He fell multiple times, but he kept getting back up. Tyel waited for him to quit, to beg for mercy, to show that his courage in the arena had been a temporary madness. He didn't quit. When Jiho finally couldn't stand anymore, Tyel dismissed him. She watched as he limped back to his room, expecting him to collapse. Instead, she heard him talking to Rena through the door. His voice was gentle, reassuring. He was telling the girl that her leg was healing well, that she would be able to walk without pain soon. The next test was endurance. Tyel made Jiho run obstacle courses designed for Vrexian warriors. His small human body wasn't built for it. He failed repeatedly, but instead of giving up, he started analyzing the obstacles. He found ways to use his smaller size as an advantage, slipping through gaps that Vrexians couldn't fit through. using momentum instead of raw strength. KL, Tayel's second-in-command, watched the training sessions with growing confusion. He should have broken by now, KL said. 3 days of this would destroy most prey species. He's not broken yet, Tayel said. But she felt uncertain. What if he couldn't be broken? On the 4th day, Tayel tried a different approach. She deliberately wounded Jiho during sparring, a deep cut on his arm. Then she left him alone with medical supplies. She watched from a hidden camera to see what he would do. Jiho cleaned the wound carefully, his face tight with pain. He stitched it closed with steady hands, talking himself through the procedure in his own language. Tayel activated the translator to listen. Okay, Jiho, he was saying to himself. Clean edges, good blood flow. No signs of infection yet. Standard sutures, nothing fancy. Just like you did 1,000 times back home. As he worked, his voice grew quieter. Hana would laugh at me right now. Remember when I practiced stitches on that old jacket? You said my technique was too slow. You were always faster than me, little sister. Always better with your hands. His voice cracked slightly. Tayel leaned closer to the screen. I hope you didn't suffer, Jiho whispered. I hope when the ships came, it was quick. I hope you were with Mom and Dad. I hope you weren't scared. He finished the stitches in silence. Then he cleaned up the medical supplies, organized them neatly, and left the room. Tayel watched him walk to Rena's room and check on her injuries, even though he was wounded himself. Tayel turned off the screen. She felt that uncomfortable feeling again, stronger now. Guilt, that's what it was called. She had learned the word, but never understood it before. The human was in pain, grieving his dead family, wounded by her hand, and his first thought was still to help someone else. That night, Tayel couldn't sleep. She found herself walking to the compound's observation deck, a place where she went to think. To her surprise, Jiho was already there, standing by the large window that looked out at the stars. You should be resting, Tayel said. Jiho didn't turn around. Couldn't sleep. Tayel stood beside him, her massive form dwarfing his small human shape. They looked at the stars together in silence. Finally, Tayel's curiosity won. What are you thinking about? Home, Jiho said quietly. Earth. My family's clinic was in a valley surrounded by mountains. We had a garden where my mother grew herbs for medicine. Hana and I used to test each other on plant names while we weeded. Your sister? Yes. She was brilliant. Smarter than me. She was going to be a better doctor than I ever could be. His voice was soft, but steady. Your ships came 3 months ago. We had no weapons, no military. We were just farmers and healers. It didn't matter. Tayel expected anger, accusations. Instead, Jiho turned to look at her with those calm, sad eyes. Do you have a family? He asked. The question surprised her. Vrexians don't have families. Not like you mean. We are raised in combat creches. Trained from birth. We don't know our parents. We don't need to. That sounds lonely. It's efficient. Those aren't the same thing. Tayel felt irritation flare. We are warriors. We don't need emotional attachments. They make us weak. Is that what you really believe? Jiho asked. Or is that what you were taught to believe? There is no difference. Yes, there is. It was the same exchange they'd had about fighting. Tayel realized Jiho was showing her a pattern. Everything she had been taught. Everything she believed about strength and weakness. He was quietly questioning. Not with arguments or debates, but with simple observations. You pity me, Tayel said, anger rising. That's what that look means. In the arena. In your cell. You pity me. No, Jiho said. I see someone who never had a choice. Someone who was turned into a weapon before they could decide if that's what they wanted to be. That's not pity. That's recognition. I am the greatest warrior of my generation. I know. And you're lonely. And you don't even know it. Tayel's 4 hands clenched into fists. She wanted to hit him, to throw him through the window, to prove that he was wrong, that she was strong, that she didn't need anything except her own power. But she couldn't. Because somewhere deep inside, in a place she had never allowed herself to look, she knew he was right. That's not strength, Jiho said softly, echoing words he'd said before. That's loneliness wearing armor. Tyel turned and walked away. She left Jiho standing by the window. She returned to her private quarters and stood in the center of the room, all four arms trembling. Something was cracking inside her, something she had built over decades of training and warfare, something she had believed was unbreakable. For the first time in her life, Champion Tyel felt afraid. Not of an enemy, not of death, but of the possibility that everything she had ever known was wrong. In his small room, Jiho lay down on his sleeping mat. His arm throbbed where Tyel had cut him. His body ached from days of brutal training. But his mind was calm. He had seen the crack in Tyel's armor. It was small, but it was there. Maybe, just maybe, she could be more than what they made her. Tomorrow would bring more tests, more pain. But Jiho had learned something important. Tyel wasn't testing him to find his weakness. She was testing him to understand her own. The alarms started before dawn, loud, piercing sounds that echoed through every corridor of the war moon. Jiho woke instantly, his medic training kicking in. Emergency. Danger. He moved to Rina's room and found her already awake, trembling. "What's happening?" she asked in her language. Jiho had learned enough Celtic over the past 2 weeks to understand her. "I don't know. Stay close to me." Guards arrived moments later. They grabbed both Jiho and Rina roughly, dragging them through the compound. Tyel was already in the main hall, wearing her full combat armor. Kale and Vex, her weapons master, stood beside her. All three looked tense. "What's going on?" Jiho asked. Tyel glanced at him briefly. "Your thralls come with us. Command orders. There's an attack." They were taken to the War Moon's command center, a massive room filled with tactical displays and communication equipment. Dozens of Rexian officers were shouting orders. On the main screen, Jiho could see space outside the War Moon. Ships were approaching. Small, outdated vessels that looked like they had been pieced together from scrap. "Celtic resistance," one officer announced. 37 ships. "They're demanding we release their prisoners." Jiho looked at Rina. Her eyes were wide, filled with hope and terror. Her people had come for her. But Jiho had seen enough battles to know what was about to happen. Those small ships stood no chance against the War Moon's defenses. The Vrexian commander, a massive male with more scars than Tyel, gave quick orders. Defensive formation. Lead them into Sector 7. Deploy the minefield. We'll destroy them all at once. Jiho watched the tactical display. He could see it happening already. The Celtic ships were flying into a trap. Hundreds, maybe thousands of people were about to die. He looked at Rina, at her small, hopeful face, and something broke inside him. He ran to the communication console. "Stop!" A guard tried to grab him, but Jiho was already at the controls. His fingers moved across the interface. He had watched the Vrexian officers. He knew which button opened public channels. "This is a warning," he shouted in Celtic. "Sector 7 is a trap. They have mines waiting. Pull back. Repeat. Sector 7 is a kill zone." Chaos erupted in the command center. Guards rushed at Jiho. Tyel moved faster, her forearms grabbing Jiho and yanking him away from the console. But the message had been sent. On the display, the Celtic ships were changing course, breaking formation. The Vrexian commander's eyes glowed with rage. The human just committed treason. Execute him. Now, every weapon in the room turned toward Jiho. Tyel still held him, her claws pressing against his shoulders. This was it. The moment where she would prove her loyalty to the Empire, where she would kill the prey species who dared to defy them. "Why?" Tyel's voice was quiet, meant only for Jiho. "They're not even your species. Why sacrifice yourself for them?" Jiho looked up at her. Even now, facing death, his eyes were calm. "Because Rina deserves to see her people again. Because those ships have families aboard. Mothers, fathers, children. Because I took an oath to save lives. All lives, not just human ones. You're insane. Maybe, but I couldn't watch them die when I could warn them. Tyel looked at Jiho's face. She saw no regret there, no fear, just quiet certainty. He had known exactly what would happen when he gave that warning. He had chosen to do it anyway, not because he was stupid, not because he didn't understand the consequences, but because saving others mattered more to him than saving himself. In that moment, everything Tyel had been taught shattered completely. Strength wasn't about domination. It wasn't about crushing the weak. Real strength was this, having the courage to do what was right even when it cost everything. Jiho was the strongest being she had ever met, and he couldn't even win a simple sparring match. No, Tyel said. The commander turned to her. What did you say, champion? I said no. Tyel positioned herself between Jiho and the guards. All four of her arms spread wide, weapons ready. He is my property. My thrall. No one touches him without my permission. He just committed treason. He saved lives. Since when is that a crime? You dare defend a prey species over your own people? The commander's voice was deadly. You dare stand against the Empire? Tyel felt KL and Vex move to her sides. They hadn't spoken, but they had made their choice. They stood with her. With Jiho. Together, the three of them formed a barrier around the human and the Celtic girl. I dare question, Tyel said slowly, why we call saving lives weakness and killing innocents strength. I dare ask why we destroy species that have done nothing to us. I dare wonder if maybe we are the ones who have been wrong. Heresy! The commander roared. Guards! Kill them all! The command center exploded into violence. Vrexian warriors attacked their own champion. Tyel fought with a fury she had never felt before. Not the cold combat efficiency she had been trained for, but something hot and desperate. She was fighting for something now. Not for glory, not for the Empire. For the small human behind her who had shown her there was another way to be strong. Kyle and Vex fought beside her. They had followed Tyel for years, trusted her judgment in countless battles. If she said this was worth dying for, they believed her. The fighting was brutal. Tyel took wounds she had never allowed before, throwing herself in front of attacks meant for Jiho. Kyle cleared a path toward the exit. Vex grabbed Rena and carried her, the small girl crying as weapons fire filled the air. The hangar, Tyel shouted. Get to the ships. They ran through corridors filled with confused warriors. Some tried to stop them. Others hesitated, unsure what was happening. Tyel didn't slow down. She crashed through every obstacle, her mind focused on a single goal, get Jiho to safety. The hangar was guarded, but Tyel had trained most of these warriors. They knew better than to face her in single combat. Still, they had orders. The fighting was quick and vicious. Tyel felt pain blossom across her body. Cuts, burns, broken crystals in her armor. She ignored it all. There, Kale pointed to a small transport ship. I can fly that. They ran for it. Behind them, reinforcements were arriving. Hundreds of warriors. Too many to fight. Tyel shoved Jiho toward the ship. Get inside, now. You're hurt, Jiho said, seeing the blood flowing from Tyel's wounds. I'll heal. Move. They piled into the transport. Kale fired up the engines while Vex sealed the doors. Weapons fire hammered against the hull. Tyel stood at the doorway, her forearms working the controls, trying to override the hangar security. The doors started to open. Space beckoned beyond, dark and vast. Freedom. Then Tyel felt something hit her back. Pain exploded through her body. She looked down and saw a blade tip protruding from her chest. One of the commanders had gotten close enough to strike. No! Jiho's voice. Hands grabbing her, pulling her inside. The ship lifted off even as Vrexian warriors poured into the hangar. Weapons fire chased them. The small transport shook and shuddered. Alarms screamed. But Kale was a skilled pilot. He flew through the closing hangar doors with centimeters to spare. They were out. Escaping into space. Vrexian fighters launched in pursuit. But the Celtic resistance ships were still nearby. They saw the transport fleeing and provided cover fire, confused but willing to help anyone escaping the war moon. Inside the transport, Jiho was already working on Tayel's wound. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, pressing bandages against the bleeding, trying to stabilize her. Tayel looked up at him, her vision blurring. "Why did you pull me in?" she asked. "You could have escaped without me." "Because you saved me first," Jiho said simply. "Because you're my friend. Because I'm a medic. And I don't leave people to die." Tayel managed a weak smile. Her first real smile in decades. "You've destroyed everything. I was human. I hope you have a plan for what comes next." "We rebuild," Jiho said, his hands never stopping their work. "Together, together," Tayel repeated. The word felt strange in her mouth. Foreign. But also right. Behind them, the war moon Krathvar grew smaller. Ahead was only uncertainty. They were fugitives now. Traitors to the Empire. They had nowhere to go. And enemies on all sides. But they were alive. And they were free. And somehow, that was enough. 6 months had passed since the escape from Krathvar. The small transport ship had limped to the nearest neutral world, a planet called Karos 3. It was a harsh place. All red sand and rocky mountains, claimed by no empire because it had nothing worth taking. Perfect for refugees, the base had started small, just the transport ship and 5 people, Jiho, Tayel, KL, Vex, and Rena. They had landed in a canyon that offered protection from scanning ships. For the first weeks, survival was the only goal. Finding water, growing food, building shelter, but word had spread. Somehow, impossible stories traveled through the galaxy faster than ships. Stories about a human who had defeated Vorthax, about a Vrexian champion who had chosen mercy over glory, about prey and predator standing together. Others came. First a handful, then dozens, then hundreds. Vrexian warriors who were tired of killing. Species who had been conquered and enslaved. Even a few humans from scattered colonies, looking for hope after losing their homes. They called themselves the Oathbreakers. Those who had broken their oaths to empires and chose instead to swear oaths to each other. The base grew. Prefab buildings appeared in the canyon, training grounds, medical facilities, a central hall where different species gathered to eat together. Something that would have been unthinkable before. Jiho found himself running the largest medical center he had ever imagined, treating injuries and illnesses from dozens of species he had never seen before. Tayel had changed in ways she never expected. She still trained warriors, but now she taught them something different. Not just how to kill, but how to protect, how to work together, how to turn the Vrexian combat techniques she had mastered into something that could defend the weak instead of crushing them. Kale ran their tactical operations. He planned rescue missions, extracted prisoners from Vrexian holding facilities, and coordinated with resistance movements across the sector. Vex trained mixed-species combat units, teaching beings who had once been enemies how to fight side by side. Rena had grown too. The terrified child from the arena was now a confident young woman who served as their diplomatic liaison. She spoke 6 languages and had a gift for helping different species understand each other. She carried messages between the Oathbreakers and various resistance groups. On this particular evening, Jiho was finishing a long surgery. A Vrexian warrior who had defected just 3 days ago had been shot while escaping. The bullet had lodged near his spine. It had taken Jiho 20 hours of careful work to remove it without causing permanent damage. He stepped out of the surgical bay, exhausted. His hands were steady, but his legs felt like water. He had been awake for almost 30 hours straight. Tayel was waiting outside, as she always did when Jiho worked on Vrexian patients. "How is he?" she asked. "He'll live. Full recovery expected in 6 weeks." "Good." Tayel walked beside Jiho as he headed toward the medical bay's rest area. "You should sleep. You're no use to anyone if you collapse. Just need to update his charts first." "Jiho," Tyel's voice was firm but gentle. She had learned this tone from watching him with patience. The charts can wait. Sleep, Jiho smiled. Yes, ma'am. They walked together through the base. It was night, and the canyon was lit by soft lights that didn't show up on orbital scans. People moved between buildings, different species working together on various tasks. A group of young Celtics were learning combat moves from a Vrexian instructor. 2 humans were teaching a class on hydroponics to anyone interested in expanding the food gardens. Sometimes I can't believe this is real, Tyel said quietly. What part? All of it. 6 months ago, I would have killed every being here without a second thought. Now I would die to protect them. That's not weakness, Jiho said. That's growth. They reached the medical bay's break room. Jiho collapsed onto a chair. Tyel sat across from him, her large frame somehow fitting into furniture not designed for Vrexians. She had gotten used to adapting. I got a report today, Tyel said. The Vrexian Empire has put a bounty on us, all 5 of us, very high. They're calling us terrorists. And what are the human governments calling us? Traitors who work with the enemy. Jiho laughed tiredly. So, we're hated by everyone. That's not new. It's getting worse, though. Both sides are actively hunting us now. It's only a matter of time before they find this base. Then we'll move. We've done it before. We can't keep running forever, Jiho. No, Jiho agreed. But we can keep building. Every person we rescue is one more who knows there's another way. Every Vrexian warrior who defects is one less soldier the Empire can use. Every human who joins us is someone who chooses cooperation over revenge. Tyel was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Do you remember what you said to me? That first night in my compound? You said I was lonely and didn't even know it. I remember. You walked away very angry. I was angry because you were right. Tyel's 4 hands rested on the table. I had never had a friend before. Never had someone who cared if I lived or died. Not as a warrior, but as a person. I didn't even know what I was missing. And now? Now I have Kale and Vex. I have Rena. I have hundreds of people here who trust me not because I'm the strongest, but because I fight for them. She looked at Jiho. And I have you, my best friend. The person who taught me that strength without compassion is just violence. Jiho felt warmth in his chest. 6 months ago, he had been ready to die in an arena. Now, he was sitting here, having a conversation about friendship with someone who had once terrified him. You taught me something too, Jiho said. What could I possibly teach you? That people can change. That it's never too late to choose a different path. You were raised to be a weapon, Tyel. Everything in your life pushed you toward cruelty. But you chose differently. That gives me hope. Hope for what? Hope that this war doesn't have to end with one side destroying the other. Hope that maybe, eventually, more people will see what we've built here and want to be part of it. Tyel reached across the table. One of her large hands gently touched Jiho's small human hand. It was a gesture she had learned from him. Comfort without words. The patient you just saved, she said. His name is Soren. He was one of the warriors who attacked us when we escaped Krothvar. He tried to kill you. Jiho nodded. I know. I recognized him, and you spent 20 hours saving his life anyway. He's not my enemy anymore. He chose to leave the Empire. He deserves a chance to be something other than what they made him. Just like me. Just like you. They sat in comfortable silence. Outside, the base hummed with activity. Somewhere, an alarm chimed softly. Somewhere else, someone laughed. Different species, different backgrounds. All choosing to build something together, instead of tearing each other apart. Rena appeared in the doorway. She had grown taller in the past months, more confident. Jiho, there's a transmission. The Celtic Resistance wants to coordinate a rescue mission. They're asking if we can provide medical support. Jiho stood up, his exhaustion forgotten. Tell them yes. How many wounded are we expecting? Maybe 50. Mixed species. Some serious injuries. Maybe 50 species. I'll prep the surgical bays. He looked at Tyel. Sorry. The rest will have to wait. Go, Tyel said. Save lives. It's what you do best. As Jiho hurried off with Rena, Tyel stood and walked to the window. She could see the red desert stretching out under the stars. Somewhere out there, the Vrexian Empire was hunting them. Somewhere else, human forces were doing the same. They had enemies on all sides and resources that were always running thin. But they also had something neither empire had. They had hope. They had proof that enemies could become friends. That the cycle of violence could be broken. That there was another way. Kale entered the room. Scout reports 3 Vrexian search ships in the sector. They haven't found us yet. But they're getting closer. How long do we have? Maybe a week, maybe less. Start preparing evacuation protocols. We'll need to move the medical patients first. Already done. Vex is coordinating with the transport teams. Kale paused. You know, when I first followed you into that command center, I thought we'd all be dead within hours. So did I. But here we are, still alive, still fighting, still building, Tyel corrected. There's a difference, Kale smiled. It was something he had learned to do in the past months. Vrexian warriors weren't supposed to smile. But many rules about what warriors were supposed to do had been broken here. The human changed you, Kale said. No, Tyel replied. He showed me what I could choose to be. I changed myself. In the medical bay, Jiho was already setting up for the incoming wounded. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, preparing instruments, organizing supplies, briefing his medical team. He had assistants now, people from different species all learning the art of healing. He thought about Tyel's words earlier. About being hated by all sides. About being hunted. It was true. This was dangerous. They could die tomorrow, or next week, or next month. But they could also live. They could keep building this impossible alliance. They could keep proving that there was another way. And maybe, just maybe, they could change the galaxy one rescued person at a time. The glance that had started everything had been 6 months ago. A human medic looking at an alien warrior with sadness instead of fear. A warrior seeing compassion and not understanding it. Now they understood each other perfectly. The war wasn't over. The Empire still ruled. Humanity was still scattered and afraid. But in this small canyon, on a forgotten planet, something new was growing. Something that both empires feared because it proved their entire philosophy wrong. Strength didn't come from domination. It came from standing together. From choosing to protect instead of destroy. From seeing the enemy and offering them a different path. As the wounded began arriving and Jiho worked through another impossible night, Tyel stood guard over the medical bay. She had been a champion once. Undefeated and alone. Now she was a protector, surrounded by people she would die for. And somehow, that made her stronger than she had ever been. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning. But whatever came next, they would face it together. Human and Vrexian. Predator and prey. Friends.